Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Birch, and in this episode, you're going to meet such an incredible teacher, an advocate, and just an amazing human with an incredible heart, Amanda Hanzlik. As you listen to this episode, you will hear her heart and soul for the power of connection. But along with that power of connection, you're going to walk away with tips you can utilize in your classroom, pre-K through grown adults, tomorrow. There are tips for how to facilitate, how to build connections, and why. This episode is both a teaching tip and an advocacy opportunity and just inspiring. I can't wait to see what you take away from this episode with Amanda Hanzlik and the power of connecting. This episode is brought to you by the Kinnison Choral Company. Check out their amazing collection of rehearsal tracks and more at KinnisonChoralCo.com. Today on the Music Ed Matters podcast, we have teacher, advocate, extraordinarily awesome human, Amanda Hanzlik. Hi, Amanda.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on the podcast. I have been so excited and looking forward to talking to you. Tell listeners, who is Amanda Hanzlik?
Okay. Well, Amanda Hanzlik. I am a mother and a partner and a teacher, an educator, a singer, a lover of love and people. And I have a really, really deep and special niche in my heart, obviously, for choral music. That is one of the great loves of my life. But I am currently teaching high school choral music at E.O. Smith High School in Storrs, Connecticut. I'm not originally from the East Coast. I was born and raised in the great state of Iowa, went to the University of Iowa, and moved to New York City and lived there in the city and in the area from 1998 until 2008. When my husband and I moved to Connecticut. So we live in northeastern Connecticut, and oh my goodness, I love it here so much. It's definitely home now. I've lived on the East Coast longer than I did in the Midwest, and can't wait for fall here in New England. So that's who I am. That's where I live, and that's what I'm currently up to. I'm also the immediate past president for the Connecticut chapter of the American Choral Directors Association. And I am one of the choir chairs for the all-state choirs for our CMEA here in Connecticut. So I love being involved with all of the music organizations here in the state. And I'm also a mama. So, I have a very busy schedule.
How old's your daughter? Is it daughter or son?
I have both. So I have a 15-year-old son, and my daughter is going to turn 12 tomorrow.
Oh my goodness. Happy early birthday.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you have two kiddos, and what grades are they in right now?
Grace is in 7th grade and Ethan is in 10th. So he's actually in my choir at the high school. So my worlds are blending. My worlds are coming together for sure.
Okay, so question, since choir is such a huge part of your world, how did you get into choir? Did you sing growing up? Did you sing in school? How did you decide choir was for you since you're so involved?
Well, my family always sang. I was definitely raised in the church, and singing what was part of our family life and family culture, not only with my parents and my sister, but also with my grandparents. And I was actually a big band person. I loved being in an instrumental ensemble all through my elementary and middle school years. And I wasn't really in the choral activities at my school because that was kind of a home thing for me. I preferred instrumental experiences. And then one of my friends dragged me to take your French to choir day in 7th grade. And I remember thinking, what is this magical place that I have entered into? Because they were singing and they were dancing. And I was also a really big like ballet person. And I saw like 100 seventh grade girls singing and dancing and moving. And this incredible human being, her name is Jean Hickman. She and I made eye contact, and I'll never forget it. And she looked at me and she said, "You can do this." And I was like, "What? Who are you? What is going on?" And she literally walked me to the guidance counselor after that class and signed me up for choir. Oh, wow. I just remember walking in there, and the energy in the room felt amazing. I immediately felt at home. And it was the combination of singing and movement that it hooked me forever for life. And I'm still in the choir room to this day. So
I love it. And seventh grade's so awkward. You never know what you're going to get in seventh grade.
It is. Yes.
For that to be, and okay, if nothing else, the listener's going to get a great idea for recruitment. Bring a friend to choir day?
Yes, take your friend to choir day. It was amazing.
I want to know how they worked that out.
Oh my goodness. I'm telling you, Jean Hickman, if you're listening, you're like, you know this, but you're the rock star of my life. This woman had, I think, 1,000 kids in the school, like 1,200 kids in the school, but there were like over 800 kids in choir.
Whoa.
Oh yeah, it was for real. So that was my entry point, was seventh grade, awesome. Treble choir. Yeah.
Okay. Did you sing all through high school and college? When did you decide you wanted to be a music educator?
Yes. So sang all the way through, let go of band, let go of dance because voice became the thing. Musical theater became the thing. Then show choir took over my life because it was the 90s and it was the Midwest. And so I knew that I wanted to go into singing at the collegiate level. I attended the Interlochen Arts Academy in the summers and ended up going to the University of Iowa, majored in voice because I didn't really know where I wanted to go with singing. And I started teaching dance and choreographing actually for show choirs and for musicals in high schools around Eastern Iowa. And I discovered that I loved teaching. And I didn't know that I loved teaching until I started teaching dance. And I remember going to my voice professor and saying, I think I want to double major. I want to have a degree in performance and I want to have a degree in music ed. And she was so supportive. And it took me longer than 4 years, but that's okay. And so I ended up double majoring in both performance and music education. And that took me into a completely different realm. And when I moved to the East Coast, I actually ended up teaching for about 10 years, teaching at the elementary level. So I was teaching pre-K through fourth grade. I was conducting children's choirs at a couple of large congregations in the area, and then was also directing musicals for middle schools and high schools as well. So my time in New York looked very different than now, my life as a singer and a teacher. But that's where the seventh grade take your friend to choir day led me, through I navigated lots of different kinds of singing and different kinds of communities of singing. When I came to Connecticut, I created a family music center at the University of Connecticut. There was a community school for the arts, and there was a program in place for like infant and toddler classes. And there was a children's choir in place as well. And so I stepped into those roles and created like a center for family music that was then in collaboration with the School of Education, where I had clinical students and grad students coming in, working with this birth through 4 kind of age range with parents and caregivers, and creating a family music class experience for different age groups. And then conducting the children's choirs at the University of Connecticut. And then after 4 or 5 years of that, the job at the high school came open. And I've told this story many times before, but every cell in my body lit up
Really?
when I knew that job was available. And I'd never taught high school before.
Just like something inside knew
something
you
inside of me, and I actually went to teachers college at Columbia University in New York, and my degree was in music ed. The whole focus of everything was early childhood. I thought that was where I was going to live for the rest of my life. Amen. And for some reason, I knew that the job at the high school was my job. And I knew that it would be a complete departure of what I was doing musically, vocally, but I knew that I could do it. And I knew that I had to do it. Something inside of me told me to take that step and to step into a completely different arena. And so that's where I am right now. I kind of circled back, but that's where I am right now in terms of just professional life, and where singing, in seventh grade treble choir has led me. I will say that coming to Connecticut from New York and entering into, doing the children's choirs at UConn and then this high school experience, I never would have been able to do it without the Connecticut chapter of the American Choral Directors Association. This chapter helped me figure out how to do the thing and to be supported and to have great colleagues. Another person who has been an incredible mentor for me is Dr. Jamie Spillane, who is the director of the choirs at the University of Connecticut. He has helped and inspired and mentored me through the past 10 years. So this year is my 10th year at the high school. Wow. So that's where I am. And now I get to serve with the ACDA. So it's come full circle for me, because that chapter helped me so much as I engaged in my career here on the East Coast. And now I'm really honored to be helping other choral directors in our state and in our region to have resources and be together and be connected to each other and, be supported and inspired. So
before we go into that further, can we talk for a second for someone listening, if you haven't taken advantage of your state, region, or national ACDA people, what are some of the resources specifically? Like, who did you reach out to? What did you ask? What did you find helpful?
The things that I felt that were really helpful to me, number one, actually being new in a community, right? New to a state or new to a region, or even just, I would say as a young teacher, new to the profession, was actually attending conferences. Really changed my life, because I was able to watch conductors conduct. I was able to experience and sing and hear so much repertoire that was outside of my realm of experience, or maybe outside of the age range or developmental level that I was currently hired to do, So showing up live, showing up in person, in the old days, pre-COVID, that was so beneficial for me in terms of engaging with my state chapters. Also, reaching out to like repertoire and resources people was essential for me. It helped me so much, because I felt really lost when I was first starting high school, because I had not been living inside of that world of repertoire, that developmental world. And so I needed people who were experts in that zone. And it was really, really essential for me to have access that was really specified. I also felt really encouraged, honestly, like I said, showing up live, just knowing there were other people in the world doing what I was doing. And I know that might sound crazy, but, of course we know there are other choral directors, but I will say here in the state of Connecticut, and I live in a really rural area. I am a singleton. There are no other choral teachers. We're also a regional school. So we're not K-12. So I'm not really connected to anyone in grades below the high school experience. So ACDA provided a way for me to be less alone, right? I felt connected to other people inside of my state, inside of my profession. And that support for me kind of like subconsciously was really important for me as I engaged in a new zone for music education and specifically for choral education.
I see a theme going through.
You weren't afraid.
I see a theme. You weren't afraid to show up in that 7th grade choir room. You weren't afraid to ask, hey, how can I get my schedule changed? You weren't afraid to talk to your voice major, your voice professor in college and say, hey, I think I want to do both. And you were obviously getting out there and figuring out getting your feet wet, doing the dance classes and such. And I think what people can take away from just your life experience is ask questions, and show up.
Right.
And don't do it alone.
Absolutely. I knew in my gut that I couldn't do it alone. And nor should I, none of us should do any of this alone.
Especially now.
Especially now.
And I think that's your story is such a perfect segue. Show up, don't do it by yourself, and ask questions. Let's talk about the power of connection and belonging. This is something you're really passionate about. Can you just give us a little glimpse into that?
Sure. And for many, many years, I couldn't really articulate this. I wasn't really necessarily great at articulating what I felt about this, but having been a high school choral educator, having been now a repertoire and resources person within ACDA, and now a president and a past president within our state chapter, I've seen connection from really different vantage points, right? I'm now a mother. I feel connection in a different way that way. I've been married to my husband for 23 years now. And that's a different layer of connection, right? But for me, when I think about connection from a more of a professional lens, I really love the definition of connection that Brené Brown has kind of articulated into the world. And what she says that connection really is an energy that exists between people. And that energy really exists when they feel seen, they feel heard, and they feel valued. And inside of that space...
Say that again for the people in the back.
Yes. So connection is an energy that exists between people when they feel seen and heard and valued.
Amen.
And, it's a place where they can give and they can receive without any judgment. And their strength and their sustenance comes from that relationship. So that's my favorite. You can Google it right now. I'm sure she says it better than I do.
But that was a great synopsis. I've read a lot of her books. She did a great job. But I love those three things: seen, valued, and heard. How do we do that? Not only in our classrooms, we've talked about how we do that with our colleagues. Show up, ask questions, provide assistance. Don't make people do it alone. How do you do that for your students?
For my students, right. And that has also evolved over the years. When I was a new teacher, I was much more hesitant to open up the space a little bit. I felt more like I kind of needed to keep control of things as a young teacher. And now this is my 23rd year of teaching. I feel very differently now. I see the classroom experience and the relationship with my students and the flow of class time in a very, very different way. So the way that might manifest in classroom experience would be where there's discussion. There's time for dialogue. There are open questions without answers. There is opportunity for students to express opinion, feeling, maybe judgment, maybe whatever it might be about repertoire, about the rehearsal process, about whatever we're engaging with. There's time and space always in every single class period, rehearsal, where it's not just call coming from me, where they have a voice in large group or in their small groups. For me, and for my students, a lot of our connective time comes in small group engagement. The small groups obviously have dialogue. It's guided by me. I provide a framework, right? I've got to facilitate that well. They have kind of an agenda, so to speak, where they ask each other questions, they reflect together, they converse together in small groups, and then we come back to the large group. So I have a facility that allows us to do this, where I have multiple large spaces where I send them out. I'm like, goodbye, go to your sectional discussion space.
So is
right?
it always by voice parts that you break them up? Are there other ways?
Not always. And that, like at the beginning of the school year, kind of right now, we're only 3 weeks in, they've spent a lot of time in sectionals because that's their kind of team. But as the year goes on, we'll have, they'll come into class and they'll get a number, groups 1 through 8 or whatever it might be, go, where they're mixed up more. And so they have the chance to really make connections across the choir. And it's not just in their voice parts. So it looks like that, it's where we're not just warming up and focusing necessarily on rhythm and pitch and the kind of the nuts and bolts of musical attributes, but there is always time in class for dialogue.
Do you see that the nuts and bolts are better because of this dialogue?
1,000,000%.
Why? Why is that?
Because this is my perception of my students. They are so deeply connected to the text, to the poetry, to each other. They understand our music on a really human level. Again, the theme of connection. They're connected to the music in a place that's not just in their head, but it's in their soul and it's in their relationship and in their conversation. And so these pieces exist in a different space. It's not just in their kind of intellectual left brain kind of space or the puzzle. Right. It's not just a puzzle, it's like there are many different attributes to our pieces. So, it's making me think about how else connection kind of manifests, or like the energy between people. So I'm kind of going to back up a little bit. So when we talked first about connection and the definition that I go toward of the energy between people, to make it even more basic, this is also what it looks like in our classroom, is at the beginning of every single class, our initial, I guess you would call, warm-up routine. Everyone comes into the class. They just put everything down. They stand up. They know that their feet are going to be shoulder width apart. They know that they're going to have a hand on their abdomen, a hand on their heart. They're going to close their eyes and breathe and hum. So we hum in unison on a pitch that I will give them, whatever it is. They'll come in and I'll just be humming, and they all start humming. They know they're to go there. And then I will guide them through breath work, postural work, but we always return back to that hummed unison sound. And I kind of walk them through almost like a guided meditation, where they are really deeply aware of their own postural awareness, their breath support awareness, the vibration that's coming out of their bodies and then the vibration that's occurring around them, their connection to the vibration in other humans around them. So it's a total yoga moment. Right. We basically ohm our way into
I was about to say, I'm feeling the ohm right now. Like
we are ohming our way into every single rehearsal. And I mean every single rehearsal. That ohm then transitions into an open bell shape of some kind. They open their eyes and they're ready to read my hand signals and think solfege in their brains and move through unison, simple patterns. They can breathe whenever they need to. They can take a break whenever they need to. They can swallow whenever they need to and then rejoin the sound. But we go from eyes closed, humming, open vowel, connected to just vibration and the people around you, and then into simple melodic work of unison.
And that it's so cool because you can almost feel in your description how it starts from what right here, and then that vibration connects to the whole.
Right.
If you do that at the start of every single rehearsal, it starts that routine and establishes that safety net too, because connection has to be done safely.
Yes. And so that connection, they have to be connected to their own bodies first, to their own vibration, which is why they actually are touching with their hand, their abdomen, their heart, right? So they are feeling like quite literally connected to their own body, to their own breath, to their own sound kinesthetically, externally with their body, as well as internally. They're listening and being connected to the people around them in super simple vibration, because the goal is the connection. The goal is not the vocal sound. The goal is their awareness. And the vocal sound comes. The vocal sound comes. So right. The goal is being grounded into their own bodies, grounded into the sound around them and the people around them. And they're giving and receiving information all the time. They're not necessarily deeply aware of it, but they come to be deeply aware of that. And so as you go on then into the life of a rehearsal, right? Every rehearsal time has its own life, right? It is its own lifetime. My goal and my hope with my choir is that grounding and that connection then takes them into rehearsal, feeling grounded, feeling connected, feeling supported in their own body and in the connection to the people who are around them with this. They're in this experience with them, so to speak. They are their counterparts. And then when we get into sectional time, I let them go and they have to engage with that. My hope is that they take that same kind of grounding into that small group time as well.
So you have section leaders like leading those that you've pre-appointed or auditioned or?
No. I do not. I allow that to naturally evolve. Cool. That is something that, I really think that like just the democratic process of shared leadership is a really interesting process. And I like to allow that to evolve over time. Often in small group work, I go around from group to group, right? I'm the wanderer of small group work, and where they all have, an agenda and that I know they're all getting through. Often as the school year goes on, I'll see, at the beginning of the year, often it's like those upperclassmen, right? It's the seniors in the group who are like, okay, guys, let's do this. Let's get going, because they just have more experience and they're more comfortable and whatever. But I will often insert myself into a small group lesson section and I'll turn and ask someone else, let's follow so-and-so in on this entrance. Could you please lead us in with your breath? So it's also my job, obviously, as the facilitator of these experiences to encourage shared leadership within these small group experiences. But I have found over time that leaders will rise And the kids will feel really comfortable with that. But then also sometimes leaders who should be rising need a little assistance. Right. But I will say the more they feel connected to each other, the more they feel connected in the large group experience, they have, they know there's not going to be a judgment, because that's specifically discussed. Like today, I always make them turn and say something to their neighbor. This is like one of the things that they laugh at me about, right? Okay, turn to your neighbor. Everyone repeat after me. Look in your neighbor's eyes and say, it's okay to make a mistake, right? It's okay to make a mistake, right? Look at your neighbor on the other side. Look in their eyes. It's okay to make a mistake, right? We're a team. Let's do this together. No judgment, judgment-free zone. Right. So my hope is that connective work to their own bodies, to each other, that whether they're in that small group or whether they're in the large group, they feel that they can produce sound into the world, or they can produce their opinions into the world, or their whatever it might be. They can offer their leadership into that small group, and that might feel more safe for them than the large group, right? So they're always doing this dance, but wherever they're dancing, there's a layer of connectedness to themselves and to the people around them that supports them in the trying. It supports them in the doing. It supports them in the inhalation and the exhalation of their sound and them and their opinions and I guess I would say their true selves.
Oh, I love that.
Right?
Yeah, their true selves. So for someone listening, you're giving us a ton of ideas for both how to start rehearsal, how to get more community and engagement. What would be some tips? Let's say younger students, so younger than high school. What are some things you might, because you've worked with all the age levels, how would you facilitate connection and belonging in younger ensembles that might not be quite as ready to lead off of your agenda?
Right. So, thinking down to like elementary, middle school, even, and especially even with high school, if you don't have the facility to kind of break up, you can do a lot of these same kinds of things, even in like pairs of kids, right? Or in the way that, I'm imagining myself like back in like my elementary school days, sitting in the circle with the guitar, all those kinds of things. How that kind of vibe feels as well. I would say that like you can structure the questioning and the opening up of space for discussion and dialogue. I think that would be the place. Like if I could go back to my, elementary school teacher self, I would create more space and more time within my 30-minute class period for actual questions and discussion and it doesn't have to be a lot of time, but I think that the opening up time for children to be able to voice not just sound, but also to process and think about the meaning and the, whatever it might be. I think it's so important, and it adds a completely different layer to their connection to the music that they're actually experiencing, right? It's not just something that a teacher is saying, you're going to do this now, right? There's a deeper understanding. There's a deeper ownership of their art. And so I guess because there's so many different scenarios. So I guess I would just say that like, as you look at the younger groups, because they might not be able to facilitate on their own as efficiently as maybe a high school or collegiate group would do, is that you as the facilitator would create different space for conversation and questions around whatever it is that whatever content you're engaging with, right? That they don't have to be making noise for 30 minutes. Right.
I like that you made the intentional connection that it's meaningful to them. I'm in the middle of supervising student teachers right now, and they've just done their first or second observation. And one of the hardest things is it's not just your instructional plan and your procedures, but how are you giving these students opportunities to think and answer thought-provoking questions, not just definition questions, and how are you relating it to them? And that becomes such a scary thing. Can you talk just to a second for the new people, the new teachers listening? What are some of the classroom management procedures or some of the tips that might help keep it still from going totally crazy when they offer this opportunity? Because I know that would be a question some of my new teachers would ask.
Right. So I definitely would put time parameters, right? Set some boundaries for the conversation. Thinking about it from a timed perspective, right? I know that like I always feel frustrated with this in like professional development days where they're like, turn to your partner and you have 3 minutes to discuss, these two things, and you never get through all the things, right? Because you want to converse, you want to engage, you want to talk about the thing, right? But those boundaries of time are so important because it forces you to really process and get it out. And take turns, right? And that is a practice thing over time that your students will get better at, and you'll get better at as well. But even for young teachers, I would definitely say if you want to incorporate conversation, maybe start with the poetry, start with the text, start with one element that is really inspiring maybe to you. So the students can see how inspiring it is to you. They can see your energy about that element. I'm just choosing poetry because often that's the thing that gets me completely cranked up. I'm like, look at this poetry. It's the most amazing thing that's ever existed in the world, Yes. But to take one element and say, okay, groups of 3, we're going to talk about this stanza, right? Let's all read it out loud together. Read it all out loud together. All right, groups of 3, you've got 3 minutes. You're going to take turns. What did you notice? Right? Or one of my favorite questions is, what surprised you? What surprised you in this poem? And have them discuss in little groups. Then the groups get to share out. Okay, 3 minutes are done. Let's go. Group 1, what you got?
Love it.
Group 2, what you got?
And they're working on like their confidence. I think that's a big thing right now, especially post-pandemic. The ability to stand up and talk in front of their peers. I'm seeing such quiet.
Me too. Why is my classroom so quiet this year?
Right.
They're silent.
I'm like, talk to each other.
Yeah,
Make a ton of noise. My favorite is like, solfege this passage. Ready, set, go. And then it's crickets. I'm like, why is no one trying to sing it by themselves? It should be a cacophony of noise. It always was a cacophony of noise.
I know. So I would say for young teachers, choose one element, have a solid question that you're asking the group, and then give them a time frame within which like you're going to time them, right? Okay, here's my phone. You get 3 minutes, ready, set, go.
And then
talk to your people,
set your boundaries.
And walk around, right? But like set a boundary, because then the kids have a beginning point, an ending point. You can give them a halfway moment. Okay, we're halfway through these 3 minutes. Move it, Everybody has to share, and it's a requirement. Everyone has to share in their small group.
What do you do when people start getting antsy? When maybe someone doesn't share, or when they're sharing out to the classroom? What do you do then?
So if they're still in their groups and they're antsy, I often will just walk around, and I feel that my presence just shifts the energy with the group. I would say to young teachers, you will be surprised how much your physical proximity to your students will just shift the energy, because suddenly they're very deeply aware of you, right? Right? Because they get into the conversation, they think they're alone, and then suddenly it's like, oh, someone else is here, right? So just your physical proximity to them. You can also like interject your voice, use your voice, interject, draw attention, redirect. right? Vocally redirect the vibe and remind them of the task at hand, remind them of wherever it is that they are going. So yeah, they'll get antsy. This is for sure.
Yeah, but it's so
also,
worth it.
don't let the time be too long, because then they are going to get antsy, right? You want to keep it in like short little chunks of time, share out, take that information and move on. Take it into your lesson, apply it immediately. Mm-hmm. And so for young teachers, you might have to abandon something in your lesson plan. I know, God forbid, but literally abandon the lesson plan. Let it go. Bye. Because something magical might happen in one of those small groups where it's like light bulbs, for the entire group. And you might not get to work on verse 2. Who cares?
Right.
Who cares? Because the magic is happening right there in the meaning and the connection for those kids to the piece of art. So
you just answered my next little devil's advocate.
Oh no!
Like, why would I do this? I have so much music to learn and a concert coming up. Why would I take time for the students to talk and weigh in? I have stuff to learn. Actually,
I had one of my clinical students ask me that the other day. So I'm just going to tell you what I've come to learn over these years. I often make the choice to present 4 pieces in the fall concert that are completely memorized, and it's a very deep, connected performance, rather than 6 or 7 pieces where we're using music or we're struggling or we're whatever. So this is kind of how this is translated for me in real life, in real time, that I would much, much, much rather have my students experience pieces of music holistically, in a true sense, and in their bodies and in their conversation and in their understanding, in a completely, I don't know, I'm searching for a word, but like in a really, really authentic and deep way where they've processed the piece. They know the other parts in the piece, right? They know what the basses are doing because they're listening to them, because they know their parts so fully that they're able to experience the entire piece of music. Mm-hmm. So I've shifted over the years from quantity to what, for me and my students, what we perceive as quality. And that is a full body, heart, soul, mind experience of the literature. So I would much, much, much rather have 4 amazingly experienced pieces rather than more content, but the meaning isn't there. I tell the kids a lot. I actually said this to the clinical students last week. I said, if it doesn't mean anything, who cares? Mm-hmm. Who cares?
The why. Why
it's the why
to your concert? Why are you standing up singing? Why are they coming to the concert? Right. Why have we spent all year on it? Why?
Right. I had a moment of tension last week with some seniors who were having a diva moment, because we all know what that looks like. But they were having a diva moment over the fact that this music is too easy. And I was like, I'm going to stop you right there. No, it's not. There's no such thing. There's no such thing. It doesn't exist. So that's a really inappropriate for this community and inappropriate statement. So I'd like you to tell me more about that. So tell me more about that. This music is too easy. Let's talk about that. And so it opened up this conversation about meaning. Meaning and connection to maybe the freshmen who have not sung since March of their 7th grade year, right? Mm-hmm. They've all come through voice changes. And now we, as like the seniors in the school, are now connecting through a different kind of literature to younger singers to help them feel included and connected and valued and successful inside of their own bodies, inside of their own sound. And they got it. They understood. As soon as we started talking, they were like, oh yeah, okay, we get it. And we talked about how complexity or quote unquote difficulty, obviously that's wonderful. And we are going to engage with deeply complex music throughout our experience in this academic year. However, meaning always trumps complexity. And that's how I feel personally, but that's also the vibe and the, that's the awareness that I want for my students, that emotional connection and feeling and meaning of this piece of art, whatever it might be, that's what matters, right? Complexity is wonderful, but it is not why we do this. It's so people feel connected and seen and valued, and that they're able to see and feel and connect to possibly a piece of poetry or a melody or a cultural tradition that they have never engaged with or heard of, right? It's the connection and the meaning that matters. That's what matters.
I love it. I mean, that's the perfect segue into the final sentence here, because you've given us tips that we can use in our classrooms. You've given us things to think about. You've given us so many great things for advocating for our programs, the why behind it. But what's the one thing? I mean, we've talked about so many things that matters. What's the one thing you really want the listener to walk away from this episode in that matters today?
I think that choir and involvement in choral singing, no matter if it's in the kindergarten classroom with 5-year-olds or a senior citizen community choir, right? Or high school, middle school, wherever you are, choir gives us such a unique space for connection and belonging and exploring through art, through poetry, through sound, what matters. It's this unique zone where music and language and vibrational experience in the body and in the soul happen. Belonging to yourself, really, really belonging to yourself enables us to share our most authentic selves with the people around us. And choir is a place where kids and grown-ups, obviously, can find that practice of belonging to yourself and belonging to a community and sharing your soul, your sound, your actual vibrational quality from your body and your soul into a group and into a community. And, I'm going to go back to my girlfriend, Brene Brown.
Yeah.
She says that belonging, really, really belonging, doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. It requires you to be who you are in the space. And in choir, there's a vulnerability aspect to being in choir when you actually let your sound and your vibration out of your body to meet up with that vibrational sound of other human beings. Where else does that happen? And then that vibrational sound meets the art. There's no other place that creates a space that's sacred. And that connection and that belonging, that is the goal. And that is what truly matters.
Oh, I love it. Amanda, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you for your time today.
Oh my goodness. Of course. I mean, you can tell this stuff gets me jazzed up.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
You are so welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope at this point you know that we see you, that we value you, and that you bring something so amazing to this table. I hope that the energy and the people around you are taking you to your next level, that you are feeling connected and inspired. If you want more on the art of facilitation, go over to patreon.com/musicedmatters and check out all of the resources from Teacher PD Weekend this year. Dr. Marshawn Hyman did a fantastic presentation on facilitation. He was also a replay a few episodes back if you want to hear the shortened version of that. If you're looking for a community, that's also a great place to join like-minded educators. I'm so thankful that you listen to the show. I cannot tell you enough that what you are doing, what we get to do as music educators, it matters. We all know that music matters, especially the connection that's available in the rehearsal process that we get every single day. And I'll see you next time on the Music Ed Matters podcast.